Hello everybody and welcome to episode 7 of AJTV. I'm AJ Sacher. I know it's been a while. Before we begin, we gotta start commenting on my appearance. As you can see, my hair is sort of faded. It's not pink anymore, it's just blonde, so got the Jerry T thing going on. Wearing a JSS shirt, which some of you kids might not even know what that is, but yeah. And I got my tea in my flower mug and water in a Coca-Cola cup. I don't know if you guys can see that logo or not. Yeah, so I think we're ready to start. Today we're talking about the finals of GP Nashville. I know it was kind of a while ago. Format's kind of not relevant, but I don't really care about any of that stuff. It's about the lessons from the match for Magic, applying to general strategy, not necessarily format-specific stuff. But this finals was really impressive. Reid really just outclassed Todd. And I mean, not to take anything away from Todd. I know he's had a lot of great finishes recently, but Reid just played out of his mind awesome. He actually aced the whole tournament. I don't think he dropped a match. And I was watching live, and the whole time I was just like, I am doing AJTV on this. It turns out there's so many awesome things that I want to discuss that I could make like 3 episodes out of this. But instead of like focusing on one thing, we're just going to watch the whole match, and I'm going to stop and talk about stuff as we go. So this episode might be a little long, which I apologize for anyone who has important things to do, but I really want to watch this match in depth with you. So first, let's look at the deck lists. Now, Reid Duke on your left is just a blue-red like Magic card deck. Todd on your right is green-white mid-range, splashing the back of Lingering Souls. Now, right from the get-go, just from looking at the lists, we have a huge disparity in approach, or not approach, but in style, I guess. Todd's deck is what I like to call aces and deuces. It's Lingering Souls and 2 travel preparations. Where are they? I guess they'd be in spells. 2 travel preparations, which, frankly, I say with only a little bit of hyperbole, are actually just unbeatable. They've never been beaten in the history of Magic the Gathering. Those are absolute aces. Those cards are ridiculous. And then he's got like an Angel, which is pretty good. And the rest of his deck is mediocre to bad. He's got like a Spider that's pretty bad, a Hunger that's pretty bad, a Vigil that's not good. Elder Cathar, his curve is high, his cards are clunky. He's got like a Kindercatch in his 3-color deck. It's not good. Make-A-Wish. The deck itself averages out to being fine, but it's made up of aces and deuces. On the other side, Reid's deck is pretty much all jacks. It's just like high-end filler into low-end bomb, I guess, with like Marauders and the Murder of Crows. But besides that, all of his cards are just good. He doesn't have really any filler. He has a few niche cards, but we'll talk about those later. It's just a difference between an overall good deck, a well-rounded deck, and a basically 3-card deck. That those 3 cards are good enough to really carry you through a lot. Now, let's go into the game. We'll be looking back at those deck lists shortly. This is not Josh Utter-Layton. This is actually Reid Duke on your left. See? Told you. Todd's on the play. Not much happens for the first few turns. In fact, I could have skipped all this, but we're in. We're ready to go. this is the first thing I want to talk about, which is the deranged assistant. The deranged assistant has a lot of unique attributes in the way that it affects the decks that it's in, and Reid has two of them. If we look, one of the things that here, let's go to the deck list. If we look at the deck list, one of the things that Reid talked about in his article was the Fear of the Bitten and the Spectral Flight. Normally, these are pretty gimmicky cards. They're not things that you want to just jam into your like blue-red control decks. Granted, you want to put them on an Invisible Stalker, but like you don't want to play 2-card combos in Limited. What really makes Reid's line of reasoning stand out is it's not just a 2-card combo with Invisible Stalker or like a way to steal a game, you know, if they don't have removal and risk 2-for-1ing yourself. He is playing it because he has things like Stormbound Geist, which he has 2 of. If you play a Fear of the Bitten on a Stormbound Geist and they kill it, then you get a 3/3 back. You're not even getting 2-for-1. They're basically just killing half of a Fear, because instead of a 4/4 attack, and then they have a 3/3 that can actually block also. And the other application that it has is these 2 deranged assistants that I mentioned. A really important concept in Magic that doesn't get talked a lot about, or at least not in depth or out loud, is extending the purpose, which is classic game theory. It's making use of something after it's done its job. Extracting value, basically, out of an expired resource. I think that Chapin actually has a really good article on this from a few years back, but Deranged Assistant, right, it's mana acceleration and it's self-mill, but Reid doesn't really have that much use for self-mill. He has a Mauler, but that's not good for like late game self-mill, and then he only has, I think, 2 flashback spells, yeah, Geist Flame and Rolling Templar. That's not a lot of use for self-mill, but so, like, once you don't need the mana, and probably won't need the self-mill, it's just a 1/1, which is not exactly worth a full card. But then you can suit it up with Fur or Spectral Flight, preferably Spectral Flight, and it's a real card. And if they kill it, yeah, they 2-for-1 you, but I mean, your Spectral Flight was not really a card until you played it, and your assistant is just a useless 1/1 at that point. So he's not only finding good uses, flexible uses for a narrow card type, which is auras, but he's also using them to extend the purpose of his otherwise mediocre assistants in the late game. Now, here is like the one thing that Reid did pretty much all match that I didn't like, which is tank here. Spoiler, he ends up bone to ashing something that Todd plays, but really Todd should have known it was there because Reid tanked so hard and then just played an island and passed. This is like a really obvious counterspell, and it's the finals. They exchange deck lists, I have to assume, so he knows there's a bone to ash in there, and he ends up running a creature into it. I think it's a Villager's. Meanwhile, if you look, he has the swamp in his hand. He could very easily just play a swamp, flashback Lingering Souls, which can't be bone to ashed, you know, attack, and make Reid lose this mana for the turn. He also could have, like, only attack with 1 if you wanted to play really conservatively, because Reid does have a Sea Kite, and then threaten to Blazing the Sea Kite to finish it off. But I don't know if Todd has like a pump spell in his hand or something that would warrant that. But I definitely think that the Bone to Ash should have been obvious. From Todd's side and from Reid's side, I think he should have tried to make it a little less obvious. And there's Murder of Crows, one of two Murder of Crows, which we're going to see do a lot of heavy lifting this match. Todd lays the swamp. And then here comes unbeatable card number 2. He's going to travel prep his 2 flyers. That's the other thing, is if he had the travel prep, I don't know if he did or not, instead of running villagers into Bone Ash, he could have just travel prepped them either twice to get around Sea Kite, or just once in Lingering Souls. Todd's thinking. Oh, there's also one more thing about the range assistant I want to mention. I think that self-mill has a lot of hidden value in the information war. Even if you don't have flashback cards, necessarily, or like you only have one, so your value of self-milling is kind of low, because decking yourself is a real thing. But also, if you are milling yourself a decent amount, then once you get to a late game stage where you only have 10, 15 cards left in your deck, then you know what those cards are and can play accordingly, which is actually has a lot of value. I call it taking inventory. When you're down to 10 cards left in your deck and you're sort of looking through your graveyard and your exile and your hand and the board and trying to process of elimination what's left in my deck. So there, he travel prepped and bashed. Reid's obviously not going to trade his Murder of Crows for a loot, a quarter of Lingering Souls, a quarter of travel prep, and a acing torch. That's just his Murder of Crows has more value in play. This block I hate. I really do not like this block. Let's go back to the deck lists. Brimstone Volley, Geist Flame, Harvest Pyre. He has 3 cards that make this not a full 2-for-1. It's like a 1.5-for-1 plus a loot, which score that however you want. But I think Geist Flame would be fine. Todd is most okay with Geist Flame because then Reid doesn't have Geist Flame for his other 2 Lingering Souls tokens. But it's still not a great exchange. And if you go back to the game, there's no way that Reid is okay with this trade. He has like a little fold equity, if you will, that maybe once he's untapped, Todd won't block, and so he can bluff. So there's like a little, there's a small percentage of bluffs in Reid's range. But more likely than not, what's happened is Reid showed Todd, he set a precedent that he is not willing to trade Murder for a token, a loot, torch by not blocking. So by attacking, once he's untapped, he's directly signaling that he has something that he's willing to do. There's Geist Flame in back. Kills a token, a travel prep plus, and a torch, and gets a loot out of it. And he did it while he had, the difference is Reid did the exchange when he had mana untapped and Todd didn't, rather than the other way around. And it's less that Reid did that and that Todd let that happen. He's at 20. You can go to 16 there. It's not a big deal. Fox back the souls. still has like 2 cards in hand and a travel prep in the yard. It's a pretty good position for Todd, even though he's facing down, 4/4 looting flyer. One of the things I think Reid does really, really well, this game in particular, is maintain pressure. Once you kind of slow down, stop attacking with your Murder of Crows and start like threatening to block spirits and stuff, that's when you are going to get overwhelmed by whatever random crappy guys Todd has and his 3 cards that are better than anything in your deck. You need time to draw to that Crushing Vines or that Death Touch guy or whatever. So here's a Rolling Temblor with 3 loots. And it asks about Apnap here. Counter on the Spirit. I really like the sort of discipline that Reid is playing with, taking his time to look at his hand, assess the situation before discarding. Even though I think he ends up discarding 3 lands here, which may seem obvious, he's still just being patient enough that did he only loot twice there? Oh, he hasn't discarded the 3rd. Yeah, see, he pitches 3 lands. That may seem obvious, but I mean, he's in the finals of a GP and he's not making snap decisions, which is something that I really look for in a wise player. I like to say Luis is the only one that gets to make a snap decision. Everyone else should think. Speaking of thinking, Todd trying to figure out how to deal with that murder. Or he just has an angel. It's kind of funny that I was talking about how it's good to keep up the pressure and then he leaves back murder that turn. But he really wanted to Temblor, and then he didn't want to trade here. Although I think he could have attacked pre. But trading 4 for 5 is not exactly what you want either. Alright, now I'm just rambling, because that doesn't make sense because the Stormbound Geist. Anyway, so Todd draws an angel after Lingering Souls and travel preparations, and it's still not enough thanks to Harvest Pyre and the Assistant and the Murder of Crows giving him more than enough to remove for it. Pitches the Invisible Stalker to the loot. Obviously, he doesn't have a pump spell in hand. Doesn't think he has the resources available to him to sort of invest 2 cards in something that's pretty much there only to race. I feel like here he's really trying to stabilize more than anything else. And he was doing pretty well until Todd ripped a Kindercatch, a castable Kindercatch right off the top onto a board that makes it quite powerful. Now Reid really needs to dig in. This is the point where I want to say it's good that he kept the pressure up. He's willing to trade murder for a fraction of Elder Cathar, half of a Lingering Souls, and a fourth of a Travel Prep, and 2 loots, now that the game's more developed and he's had, 4 loots already. Like, that's a lot more value than the trade that Todd was offering earlier. And then offered again. See how Todd's doing math right there on his hands, kind of tapping the table? I used to do that. I still do it a little, but I actually got in trouble because I was playing poker at the Borgata with Gerard Fabiano, and I was doing math like that, trying to calculate like my pot odds going to the river, and the dealer took it as a check when I very much wanted to bet. So I've tried to stop doing that. Not the best habit to get into, especially if you do like very specific math. It looked like Todd was just kind of twiddling his fingers, but if you do like specific math physically like that, then people can actually get pretty sick reads off of you. Like what combat trick you're representing or what have you, what race changer. Todd comes out of the tank with a flashback of Travel Prep. I'm not the most confident that this is wrong, but I feel like it is. He puts a counter on the Kindercatch up to 7 when it's lethal in 2 no matter what, and the difference between 6 and 5 with his board is not that relevant. I think the counter would have been better served on one of the 1/1 tokens, so that even if he trades his 4/4 token for the Murder of Crows, then he's still able to stave off the Soul Caesar indefinitely, so that it doesn't end up taking the Kindercatch that will then kill Todd. That ends up not being the case. That ends up not being relevant, I don't think. But just an observation I had that something I would have done differently. Like here, now Todd has to take 4. Because if his 4/4 died, then the Soul Caesar gets to start attacking. If this was on here, then he is very happy to take this trade and like race a Stormbound Geist with a Kindercatch, Screeching Scab, about to be martyred for the cause. And it's worth noting that even though Reid is in the Abyss, every sacrifice gives him a loot, so it's less likely that he just runs out of creatures. Todd wants to read the backside of Soul Caesar. Just says you control enchanted creature. The rest, as Patrick Sullivan would say, is just a story. The rest is just a story. Comes from when he was playing Walking Corpse in Standard. Somebody picked it up and read it. No, man, it's just a story. Just a story. Chump, loot. Thought Scour is a cool card in Reid's deck because, like I said, he has those 3 or 4 if you count Harvest Pyre, things that like stuff in the graveyard, but also it's just extra information. And also, he has a Delver, which it helps flip. Ooh! Ooh, 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 ooh! I forgot to say, the other cool thing that's about us that... The other cool thing about Reid Duke's Assistance is his Delver. You can use it as, like, a poor man's looter, where you look at the top card of your Delver, and if it's a land, then you activate Assistant to get rid of it before drawing. I've actually done that quite a bit. In fact, once on my stream, I had a situation where I had Delver Assistant, and he had some like 4/4 flyer that I couldn't get through, but he couldn't attack or he'd die. And I actually like would draw or reveal instants to the Delver and draw them without flipping it, so that I could keep my ghetto looter going. It's kind of a corner case scenario, but it definitely has value, and it's something to do with your otherwise lame assistants. Let them assist you in your delve for secrets. God, shoot me now. So Reid passes. I think his hand is like Sea Kite Moon Heron. Something like that. Looks like he has 4 cards actually, but I know he has Sea Kite and Moon Heron at the very least. Todd doing a not so subtle count of the graveyard. It's definitely good to, in general, not ask how many cards are left in their deck, but rather ask to see their sideboard, or I'm sorry, ask to see their graveyard and then their exile, and count their hand, board, graveyard, exile, and then subtract from 40, assuming they're playing 40. Because when you're on the sort of like backdoor draw to, what is with me and the poker references today? When you're on the backdoor draw to getting them to deck themselves, that's something you want to avoid letting them know that you have in mind. So Reid, Todd actually thought about it, a more aggressive attack there, but thought better of it, and it turns out that Reid actually would have blown him out with Sea Kite, but Todd just played it a little more conservatively, which I definitely agree with. Just get the Abyss in there. But like I said, Reid gets the loot with every chump, so it's going to be hard for Todd to outdraw him. Although he did draw Recluse, which is like one of the best cards in his deck at this point. So now Reid was I feel that Reid was made aware of his deck size by Todd's counting. I might be, projecting that a little, but the story's better that way, so I'm going to tell it like that. My my variation of Patrick Sullivan's "It's Just a Story" was to like get offended that he's like reading your walking corpse. Be like, dude, we're in the middle of a game. Now's not the time to be brushing up on your lore. You're facing down a 2/2 for 2. I don't know if you're aware, but you're under immediate threat from this grizzly bear. The Abyss. And here Reid teams up. When I was originally going through this game, here I thought like, oh, the 7th power from Kindercatch actually ended up mattering because he gets to kill Murder and Sea Kite instead of Murder and Moon Heron. But it doesn't actually matter because the game wouldn't have gotten to this point because a 4/4 would have already traded with the Murder turns ago. But instead, that Murder that's done so much work teams up with a Sea Kite to take down the Kindercatch and a quarter of travel prep and gets 2 loots. Oh, He actually killed the Moon Heron instead of the Sea Kite anyway. Interesting. I guess because of Recluse. I don't know. Seems weird because now he can't attack with his 4/4 without threatening to. Like he gets the bad end of it. Whereas if it was a 3/2 and a 2/2, then at least he gets to kill them both. Then like his Recluse squares off against a 3/3, and then he has 2 spirits left over. Or like he could just make that potential trade, and then his Recluse gets to attack while his spirits chump, since Reid is on such a low life total. I don't know, I didn't even realize that the first time through. That seems like an interesting decision. And by interesting, I mean, if I feel like it's wrong. But I'm not confident enough to say Todd was wrong, so I'm saying it's an interesting decision. There's the other deranged assistant. Here's the attack. And actually that double block I was just talking about comes up here. Sea Kite and Stormbound Geist on the enlarged spirit. The engorged ghost. The dude has lived a long and full afterlife. Reid takes 2 down to 3. Todd has like 3 lands in his hand at this point, which I'll talk about in a second. This game's actually pretty much over. I wish I had like a fast forward feature. Maybe that's something to put in the notes for next episode, or upcoming episodes. But like all the important decisions have been made, and Reid's just outvalued him at every single turn, despite being under the abyss and facing down 2 unbeatable cards and a bomb. Just like powered himself through his deck with a murder, looted himself into a hand that was capable of winning. Reid counts his deck real fast. Little subtle things like that are good to try and pick up on, but they're not that important. It's more important to just play tight rather than trying to Hawkeye your opponent, see if he gives you any weird tells. Another Stormbound Geist. Todd draws like his billionth land. He cuts lands, which is good to do. He actually cut 3 to rep Crushing Vines there, I'm pretty sure, which is definitely a good thing to do, but this particular instance is not going to matter. And dome you. Hooray, 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 blah, blah, blah. So that was game 1. It's really cool, right? Todd had an awesome draw. He had Lingering Souls with the black to flash it back, multiple other creatures, travel preparations. On 6 mana he had Angel and then top decked Kindercatch. had Recluse on a board that he needed, drew Recluse on a board that like needed Sky defense, and Reid beat him with a bunch of jacks. Let's go to the deck lists. It's really, let's go back to my face. A lot of people write that game off as Todd flooded out because he drew 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 lands. But there's a few that's an oversimplification. It's a little more complex than that. First of all, Todd's playing 18 lands and a Caravan Vigil. He has 19 lands in his deck. Compared to Reid, who has 16, 3 whole less lands. 3 out of 40, that's a huge difference. Huge. Reid gets away with this because he has a much cheaper curve, or cheaper deck, I guess. His curve is lower, and he has 2 assistants, which, even if he starts to flood out, as we said, are not dead. He has found ways to extend the purpose. Even as chump blockers, they have value, but in a deck with 2 Murder of Crows and a bunch of flyers and Invisible Stalker that are going to be racing, a chump blocker has more value in Reid's deck than it would in most decks. Meanwhile, Todd has quite a high curve and 3 colors, demanding a lot more mana sources. And he doesn't have things like Murder of Crows. He doesn't have ways to mitigate flood like Reid does. Reid, not only did he build his deck in a way to, like, draft and build his deck in a way to deal with that sort of game, but he also refused to trade away his Murder of Crows despite a fairly aggressive, fairly intimidating start from Todd, because he knew that Murder Crows had more value in play than a couple points of life and trading with an immediate threat. And I think that a lot of that gets lost if you just write off the game as, like, being pretty even early and then Todd flooding out late. You know, Reid drew spells. Like, yeah, he also looted 8 or 9 times and has 3 less lands in his deck. Of course, he didn't flood out as much. Let's go to the next game, which is much shorter, you'll be happy to know. Come on, come on, come on, come on. There's the bracket. Oops. You had to see my face when I wasn't expecting you to. Alright, so here's the bracket. We're going to cut to the game in a second. And Todd is on the play, having lost game 1. And keeps his 7. And we're going to see some flaws, I guess, in his open. That's right, no play even on turn 3. Here, Reid did it again, less so than the first time, but he did it again. Tank, island, go, and seriously, not attacking with the assistant. This is the most obvious Bone to Ash since the last Bone to Ash that Reid cast. But Todd obliges him. Granted, I'm sure hopefully he used the worst card in his hand. Because, like, at first, I was actually shocked that Abby Griffin was even in Todd's deck post-board. Because it's so bad against Reid's deck. I mean, it's a bad card. It's definitely a deuce on Todd's deck of aces and deuces, but I realized that, you know, Todd's playing 18 lands and a lot of filler, like Make-A-Wish and a 19th land and so on, that it's possible he was just so short on playables that he couldn't even board out his Abby Griffin, even though it matches up poorly against Reid's entire deck. Like, a Marauder after it gets a hit in, the Murder of Crows, Seakite eats it, Stormbound Geists are like the ultimate value against it. Anything with an enchantment on it can't be dealt with by it. It has niche uses, such as against exactly Moon Heron, or if you preempt a Marauder, which, if you preempt a Marauder, is actually pretty good, because then you get to attack while also holding off Marauders. Whereas otherwise, if Abby Griffin didn't have Vigilance, like if it was a 2/1 flyer or something, he would have to hold it back for the fear of Marauders, whereas Abby Griffin obviously gets to attack anyway, thanks to the wonderful world of Vigilance. But besides those like two pretty niche uses, and I guess oh wait, I'm gonna get to that in a second. It's pretty bad in general against Reid's deck, or at least that was my first inclination. But like I said, it's possible Todd just didn't have enough playables to board it out. But also, he has 3 permanent pump spells: Travel Preps, 2 Travel Preps, and the Hunger, which actually makes it almost passable. He also has the Bear, which, if you ever get, like, Torch and Bear, and you can pump it up. But like a 3/3 flyer, especially with Vigilance, actually blanks a lot of Reid's deck. It kills both sides of a Stormbound Geist, outclasses the Seakite, can team up pretty easily to kill a Murder. And if you're using Travel Prep, that means you have 2 sides, so it's going to be a 4/4, which means it outclasses both sides of Stormbound Geist and the Moon Heron, trades with Murder, outclasses Seakite, outclasses an assistant wearing a Spectral Flight. So, as bad as Abby Griffin is alone, and as bad as 2-card combos, quote, are in Limited, I feel like Todd's deck is underpowered enough, he was short on playables enough, and his matchup was bad enough that having an Abby Griffin in his deck with such niche uses as holding off a Marauder, preempting and holding off a Marauder, trading with a Moon Heron, or being 2-card comboed with Travel Prep, gives it enough percentage of like goodness value that it's probably worth having in your deck. My initial reaction was borderline disgust, because I actually hate Abby Griffin. I think it's a horrible card. But you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Marauder tapped and attacking, and with 2 counters on it, I get it. And it would have won the game straight up, but Todd actually top decked Crushing Binds, which he just uses right away, because you never know what Reid's going to pull on you. Now, for those keeping score at home, Todd's curve this game was go, 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 Abby Griffin, Crushing Vines. And Reid Duke's curve was nothing on turn 1, Assistant, Bone to Ash, Marauders, Murder of Crows, skip land drop, aka my hand is all spells. You see the disparity there in mana used, in resources taken advantage of. Thraben Sentry, and a Travel Prep. Here, Reid goes into the tank pretty hard, and it turns out it's because he has Lost in Mists and Geist Flame and is deciding which to use. I am so happy. I heard from the coverage, Ben Swartz said in the coverage that he had a Lost in Mists in his sideboard, and while watching this live, I was like, Reid, please bring it in. Please bring it in. And I was really happy that he did, because it ends up playing a pretty big role in this game. But he goes with the Geist Flame on the Thraben Sentry, and Todd actually has the Hunger of the Wolf Pack, or whatever that card's called, and lets it live and get another counter. Once again, Reid using pretty much all of his mana. And it's worth noting there that he used his assistant on end step, even though he already had his Geist Flame, and he has a creature for Mauler, so the only reason that he would use it is A, Rolling Temblor flashback, or B, information. Like I said, you can always take inventory later in the game once you've milled yourself a little. And there's Loss and Miss, bounced your huge thing. Again, his curve this game after Marauders into Murder was Geist Flame back it, Lost and Missed. Just using all of his mana minus assistant for 2 turns. All of his mana every single turn. That's ABC, like, core limited magic principles at work. So he plays Juggernaut instead of his Gallows Warden just to maximize damage and because Mize. And has, I think, just one card in hand, which is the Flyer. Once again, he's a little, quote, flooded with his 19 mana sources against a player looting away lands, and with an assistant in play, and with way less lands in his deck. I know I'm kind of harping on that a lot, but that was like my biggest frustration watching live, was people are like, oh, poor Todd, he's flooding out so hard, when that was just not the case. If you missed it there while I was blabbering, Reid Duke puts a spectral flight, on his assistant, extending the purpose once the assistant's no longer useful. He doesn't need any more flashback stuff. He doesn't need the extra mana. He's not going to need the chump blocker since Todd's going to be dead. He found use for the 1/1. And then burn him out with Brimstone Volley. And there's the hand. Cool, right? One more thing on the deck lists. I know this episode's really long, I'm sorry. I talked about how Todd's deck is aces and deuces, but if you look closely, it's a little worse than that. Reid's deck has a lot of cool interactions, like Murder of Crows and all of his removal, for example. Also, the Deranged Assistants to power out his super awesome 5-drops, to get his flashback spells, to get his Mauler, to work with Delver as a looter. Spectral Flight and Fear of the Bitten with Assistant, more specifically with Invisible Stalker and Stormbound Geist. All of his self-mill with Harvest Pyre and his 2 flashback spells. Thought Scour with Delver, etc., 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 etc. His cards have a lot of cool interactions. Todd's, on the other hand, don't really. I mean, I know that's the nature of, like, blue versus green, but he just has, like, some guys and some spells that are good with guys. He has Torch, which plays well with Hunger, and where is it? Juggernaut. But beyond that, it's really just guys and spells. And I think the biggest sort of realization for me about Todd's deck is if you look at his curve. This format that they have it in, sadly, does not give you curve, and I decided to just jump into this AJTV rather than do hours of preparation like I have in previous episodes, so I don't have it laid out for you, but he only has 1 2-drop in Silverchase Fox. That is the only 2-drop, or 1-drop, he has no 1-drops, in his green-white aggro deck. Well, not aggro. because he has no 2-drops. The things that work the best with his aces, Travel Prep and Lingering Souls, are 2-drops. You want to go 2-drop, 3-drop, Travel Prep and back it. Or 2-drop Lingering Souls, 2-drop and back Lingering Souls. Or back Lingering Souls and Travel Prep, or whatever it is. Something for 2 mana. But he has 1 2-drop in his entire deck. That has to be the biggest downfall of his deck. Not the excess mana sources, because with his curve this high and trying to splash the 3rd color, I don't think you needed 2 swamps, but you do need another mana source. And you do need a lot of mana sources for this high of a curve with no card draw or anything to help you get there early. But I really wish that the draft cap was up, because I think what hurt Todd the most was a lack of 2-drops. Even like the worst 2-drop you can think of, like even like Unruly Mob would be a welcome addition into Todd's deck. Cool, right? We talked about a lot of stuff today. Hope you were taking notes. I have been streaming a lot. I'm doing my closeout and forgot what I need to talk about. I've been streaming a lot. You should check it out. Sorry, I keep bumping the desk. Twitch.tv/AJ Sacher. Moto Cube drafts just ended yesterday, and those were awesome. I don't even like to cube, but we're in between formats, so my go-to excuse of I only play real formats didn't quite work. I streamed a bunch of cube drafts, and they were really fun, and I hope that the Moto guys make cube drafts a regular thing. I don't want them always on there, but every once in a while having them up for a few days would be nice. Miracle cards were previewed yesterday also, and I don't want to get into a huge thing about Miracle cards, about their design or their effect on Standard or anything like that. They work well with Ponder and Nauseous Revival. I care less about those, although it is really cool. Somebody mentioned that Think Twice goes up in value because it gives you 2 redraws on their turn to hit a Miracle, which is pretty cool. Same with Desperate Ravings. But what I do want to say is, please, Wizards, please, if Miracles become a problem in Legacy, which I feel they might, depending on the power level of some of them printed, please ban the Miracle and not Brainstorm. That's all I have to say. Legacy players, they need their Brainstorm. Brainstorm's the only thing that keeps Legacy interesting different from other formats. Cool? Cool. Let's go to the little outro screen. Goodbye, guys. Thanks for watching. Oh, I changed my Twitter. It's my name now instead of HUDbot. Follow me, and I post when articles go up, when I stream, all that good stuff. Thank you. Thank you for watching.